What I want to do is I want to make a distinction between a mental image and a visual image. And there are profound differences, actually. You might think a mental image and a visual image, they're both images, but in a sense, the transition from a visual image to a mental image is a very big cognitive conceptual shift. So here we have now, simply on this screen, you're just seeing some words where I've said, in your mind's eye, I want you to think of the Eiffel Tower. We're not going to show you the Eiffel Tower yet. Just in your mind's eye, we want you to build an image of the Eiffel Tower. Now, I'm about to show you an image of the Eiffel Tower and talk about the difference between seeing this image and building the image of the Eiffel Tower in your mind. So here's the image. Okay, here's a perceptual image. So invariably, it wasn't quite what you were thinking. It wasn't what you had in mind. But you can immediately recognize this is the Eiffel Tower, and this associates with that label, Eiffel Tower. Your mental image, Eiffel Tower, has that label. This picture also, that's it. It has that label. But it wasn't this image that you were imagining. And what you see in this image is some things you perhaps hadn't thought about. The trees at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, it's winter. You hadn't thought that it might be foggy at the time. And in fact, you can see there's some writing up the side, which you probably wouldn't have anticipated. In fact, this photograph was taken in the year of the centenary of the Eiffel Tower, when it was 100 years old. So there are a number of things about it which are kind of different. But also, if you work very hard at that image, you can see a lot of detail, perhaps details you've never seen before, if I tell you to look really closely at the way in which it's built, things that you didn't see in that mental image. So what's the difference then between mental images and perceptual images, images that you actually see? Here's a set of contrasts, and when you think of these contrasts, these are profoundly different events. If you hadn't seen a picture of the Eiffel Tower at some point, or seen it in actuality, whatever it is you've experienced, you wouldn't have been able to build the mental image. But when you build the mental image, it's actually very, very different from a perceptual image. And when you go back to see the Eiffel Tower again, it's a different process. In what respects? Well, firstly, perceptual images you see with the body's eye, and mental images you see with the mind's eye. But the mind's eye is not really an eye at all in ways that we're going to tell, that we're going to analyse now. Vision is of something present. I might be standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, but in this case, when you were looking at that picture, you were seeing a picture of the Eiffel Tower and it was present. That picture was there with you, you were looking. Whereas envisaging is actually of something that's absent. When you were in your mind's eye, you were building a picture of the Eiffel Tower or a mental image of the Eiffel Tower. It was something that wasn't there, okay? That perceptual images are about the here and now. And in that sense, they're kind of a bit like speaking. Speaking always happens in the here and now, except when it's recorded, but then it's not the same thing. It's not speaking in that same sense. So, vision always happens in the here and now, even if it's looking at a picture, looking at the real Eiffel Tower or looking at a picture. Whereas what we're doing with mental images, it's something at a distance because we don't have the Eiffel Tower or a picture of it in front of us, and we're conjuring up that image. And in that sense, it's a little bit like writing. It's at a distance. It's actually unlike it too, but in some senses, the difference is as big. That perceptual images happen in the present, but mental images are from the past. They're of the past. It's recalling having seen the picture or recalling having stood at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. That perceptual images have inexhaustible detail. I mean, you could stop there and you could see all little struts in the structure of the Eiffel Tower. You could see some of the branches of the tree. You could notice a bird on the tree. You could notice all kinds of detail. And in fact, the detail in visual images is inexhaustible. It is infinite. If I'm sitting even in a boring place in a doctor's surgery, I can look at the ceiling, I can look at the floor, I can, and there's always something else I can find if I keep looking. Whereas the mental images only ever take what I call criterial features. There's something Eiffel Tower-ness about it, which in a rough, schematic, abstract kind of way, I included a mental image. And in a sense, that makes it a kind of a more, conceptual, more abstract kind of thing. That what happens is that in what I do with the cognitive process of perception is I find meaning in a scene. So I'm looking around and, oh, look, there's the Eiffel Tower and there's something else. There's a building and there's a person walking past. I'm looking around actively and I'm actively finding meaning in the scene, in the act of perception. Whereas what I do with mental images is I create meaning from memory. So in a sense, what perceptual images are is they're about recognition. Oh, look, I recognise that person. Oh, I've seen a tree like that before. Oh, I recognise that, that's the Eiffel Tower. But whereas mental images are about remembering, different kind of mental process, fundamentally different in all those ways. And in a sense, the difference is between the real, this is really a picture of the Eiffel Tower, or this really is the Eiffel Tower, and the imaginary, because I'm not there, I'm conjuring up this mental image. And one of the, it's funny that philosophers and theorists until recently haven't thought much about imaging, to be quite frank. And one of the important, a rather obscure book, which is now not thought about much, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, wrote a book called The Imaginary. So imaginary is a nice word which comes out of, it correctly comes out of the word imaging. And his argument was the imaginary was the basis of freedom. The fact that you can build mental images of the scope of your activity, how I would like to be free, the things I would like to do, utopias, possibilities, possible worlds. We, in mental images, can construct worlds that have never existed, otherwise known as science fiction or narratives of all sorts of kinds. We can, in mental images, imagine a building that's never been built and then go ahead and build it. So one of the critical features that we have, which is part of human existence, is imagination, which is the basis of freedom. We have scope to act beyond what is immediately in front of us, and we can immediately see because we can build mental images of alternatives, visions of alternatives. So for Sartre, in fact, from mental images to the imaginary to freedom is a set of important transitions.